Hello.
Hi. Welcome back. Shower Talk with Tina and Norm. I don't know where that came from, but it felt right in the moment. I'm kind of regretting it now. But yeah. Welcome back.
Episode 50.
Episode 50. Can you believe we've been doing this for 50 times?
It's been fun.
It's not like a exact time frame, 50, but no, it has been fun. It's our thing. Like, it's therapeutic for us.
It
It's
is.
You know, I was thinking about it a little bit ago, and I thought, wow, 50 episodes. So those of you that continue to listen, thank you for listening.
Absolutely.
Both of you. Like, it's our entertainment, honestly. It's therapeutic for us. Get a little energy from chatting, right?
Yeah.
And
talking about the things that people don't feel comfortable talking about.
Hopefully
So
it's helping.
They get to be part of the conversation without having to say anything.
Agreed. and the reality is, if it does help you or if you've learned anything, we'd love to hear about it.
Absolutely.
You could always go rate us. You could go on YouTube, like and subscribe to some of our videos, or on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Google.
We should be there somewhere.
Yeah. I saw
we're all over
all
the place.
I know, it's pretty cool. Actually, I think we're on iHeartRadio. I saw too.
Yeah, I think that's one of those that I set up
pretty
originally.
Cool. But anyway,
we're trying something new with lighting. I just set up a bunch of stuff today and moved things around so it'll look a little different. So
Speed's with us.
Yeah, Speed Racer's up there on the wall. He's been here the whole time. It's just
you just didn't get to see him before.
Yeah, because the way that we had to zoom in and stuff. But hopefully it helps now.
So
episode 50. Really quick. Obviously, we're still doing our Emerald fat loss.
We sure are.
Right at Soray Wellness at LA Tan in Wheaton.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Donata Square. Got to say that correctly, or else we'll get flamed by all of the Wheatonites. Yeah, Wheatonians. I wonder what they call them there.
I don't know.
It doesn't really matter, because we'll just do whatever the hell we want to anyway. But it's going well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're enjoying it.
We've both noticed differences.
I have noticed a difference.
My clothes are fitting better, and and I still have a long way to go.
I know.
With
my
sessions, but it's been amazing.
Me too. I noticed my chest, is less and less flabby.
Yep.
So it's
been great.
So far, it's doing what they said they did.
It
so
sure is.
Thanks to those guys over there.
Yeah, they're all really cool.
Give them a shout out.
Yeah.
You can look on our page. We tag them every time. We'll link them.
Yep.
And, let them know that you listen to our podcast.
Absolutely.
Maybe they'll hook you up, or hey, maybe they'll hook us up. That's what this is all about. It's all about us anyway. So yeah, thanks to those guys. But episode 50. What did we decide to call this one?
Sexual Camel.
That's right.
And your tagline?
One hump or two. It makes me think of the cartoon where they bonked them, or was it Three Stooges? They're like, I swear, I think it was Bugs Bunny. They're like, one, would you like sugar? Yes. One lump or two?
Oh, yeah.
Two, bam, bam, and hits them over the head twice.
It could be that, or it could be Three Stooges.
That's not what this is about. I mean, maybe it's about hitting it once or twice, maybe.
Actually, what's funny is the whole sexual camel thing actually came from an episode of Everybody Loves Raymond.
It did.
That's where it started.
Correct.
Because Ray called himself a sexual camel.
Right, because he wasn't getting it. Right, he wasn't getting sex. We actually had a bunch of sex kind of stuff with this to talk about.
Yeah, so we're like, why not?
Yeah, sex is fun, so definitely.
But it comes up in a lot of times too, especially, the reels that pop up all the time on Facebook and Instagram, and it's always like, the relationship people talking, and it seems like it's always like, oh, the woman doesn't want to have sex anymore, or the sexless marriages, or there's like all these dismal numbers of like, only 15% of married couples have sex 15 times a year or something like that. And I was like, where are you getting those numbers from? I
don't know.
I don't know either, but it kind of started this is what kind of started this conversation.
I was really hoping you were going to say it was 69% because I think that would be really funny.
No,
but that wouldn't be that dismal, would it?
No, it was a small percentage, but it makes me want to like go and ask people, but
I thought you were going to say it makes you want to bump up the numbers. I think it's funny because we see it represented in television. Obviously, it comes from somewhere, and of course, it's made to sound worse than it is.
Maybe, although those numbers sounded pretty bad.
I know. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Yeah, right? True. Did the shows make it better or worse, or what happened? And I think, I think, yes, a lot of times you'll hear the guys complain, oh, my wife doesn't want it. But then I've heard plenty where the guys didn't, once they got married, they stopped having sex. So I don't know.
I mean, everybody blames it on their kids and their schedules and whatever else. And I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, I think obviously we know all of these things are it's like an attorney. It's like attorney speak, right? It depends, right? How often should you be having sex? It depends. That's exactly what an attorney would say.
That's true, though, because it's for everyone, though. I mean, not everyone's the same.
Right.
However, that's where a lot of the intimacy part. It doesn't have to be just that, but that's a huge part of it.
It adds to intimacy. I think
100%.
I think after you have sex, I think people that it's a overflowing or longer lasting feeling afterwards, right? Meaning of intimacy,
connection.
So so it carries over.
Absolutely.
And if you've gone a little bit of time and you haven't, then you're reconnecting in those moments, and then it follows you in the upcoming days, afterwards or moments after, whatever, however you want to look at it. I think it keeps you kind of connected. But the depends part is, what's the right answer? Well, it depends on your schedule. But I think the big thing that we can agree on is it's important, right? It's important for a relationship.
It's not the most important.
It's not the most important, but it's
important.
Top 5, top 3.
Yeah.
Top 3, top 5. Okay. Depends.
Yeah.
It depends. I think, yes, all of those things are true with schedules and life circumstances and stressors. And then, if you talk about illness, there's some people that they don't feel well.
Yeah.
And it brings us to another topic that we'll get into in a second, because now, it's a perfect time to talk about it. But, or in conjunction with this, but it's going to depend on what's right with you and your partner. It's a conversation you have to have. And if you guys, when you first get together, if you have a certain thought of how that's going to go, and then nobody sticks to it, or one person doesn't stick to it and the other one's like, well, what the fuck? There's more conversations that need to be had.
Yeah.
You have to relay your feelings about it. But I also think that, and this is me as a guy saying that, you have to be accepting and open to the fact that there might be reasons the other person's maybe not feeling so amorous, so to speak, right?
Yeah. That's true. There's it's when you get to be our age, it's kind of funny because
early 20s.
I remember being like in my early 30s when I was newly single and, going out there and being like, oh my God, like I have this really small window because according to like what everybody says, once
Cosmopolitan
you're in, like,
magazine.
No, I never read Cosmo, but once you're in your 40s, like, your libido goes down and guys can't get it up anymore. And you don't want to, you go through menopause and you don't want to have sex. It was like, oh, like how much time do I have?
Right.
It was kind of like
2 weeks.
yeah, I mean, it was like, wow. I mean, I was 32 when I
Summer of
found myself
George.
single, and I was like, wow, this is kind of fucked up. But at the same time, those aren't really like
No.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen. However,
Yeah.
I feel like we're like brainwashed into believing that just because you're in your 50s means you don't have sex anymore, or because you went through menopause means you don't want to have sex anymore, or because you're a guy over 40 or 50 you automatically have low testosterone and you have ED. And it's like that's no, that
Right.
doesn't automatically happen just because you hit a certain age.
Right.
Like, and I know we could like laugh about it and joke about it, but I mean, I think it puts the wrong idea in people's heads sometimes.
Absolutely.
I know that's how I thought was
Right.
There's like nothing to look forward. So you're telling me that you lose all of this intimacy and this fun and all this other, that because, it's funny like when you can laugh and goof off at the same time, like all of it. It's all like the playful, connecting kind of stuff. You don't want to lose that. I mean, I feel like. Well, is that a big reason why a lot of people's relationships kind of fall to the wayside is for that reason?
Well, I also think people put too much stress on frequency, right?
Yeah.
Over the quantity versus, the time you're actually spending to make it happen. Now, you have to make determinations, is this time going to be, we're doing it to just bang one out, right? Or are we doing it, we have a little more time to, I don't know, be more lovey with it, I guess, more intimate with it. And that's okay. Both are fine if it's fine for you guys, right? If it's fine for both of you, there's nothing wrong with it. We can't, if you're comparing your sex life to somebody else's sex life, then you should probably be comparing everything else too.
Yeah, probably.
Your age, all your health history,
right?
Your jobs,
if you have kids,
all your stressors, right? They probably have no kids, and they can just give it to one another whenever the hell they want. Oh, it's Sunday at 1:00. Oh, let's do this.
Well, and then it's like cyclical sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Like you might have where you're like, you're having sex like 5 times a week for like 3 weeks or a month or something. And then maybe you go like a month and it's like 2 times or 4 times. Like, again, it's like funny because I think in some people's mind, they're like, oh my God, we used to have sex every single day for like whatever. And now it's down to this. And it's like, and I mean, in the beginning of a relationship, most people, that's like, they can't wait to tear each other's clothes off. That's usually why you got together,
but a big part
attraction.
Of that, right.
But it's like, and
the
then,
attraction. There you
go. And it's still there. It's just, now it's yours. Like, you didn't have it. You craved it. You wanted it. You were looking forward to it. Now you have it. And now that person becomes your person and you have access to it all the time now versus, maybe before before you knew them or before you were
you're trying to make the most of your time.
Right. It's like, I
think that's what you're trying to say.
I mean, that as well, but also that person wasn't like you weren't together at the time or like you were just getting together or whatever. Right.
Well, that's what I'm saying is it sounds like, if you see each other a couple times in a week, okay, versus 7 days a week.
Right. Exactly.
You're still having it. Hopefully you're still having it at the frequency that you want or the quality that you want, whatever. Yeah. Or both. But if you want to compare that, okay, we see each other Friday through Saturday night and we have to go back to our lives on Sunday and then we get back together and date. So you fuck like rabbits all weekend, right? Or every chance you get. That's right. What you do. And part of that's lust, and sexual attraction and figuring all that stuff out. You haven't had time to do all the other stuff. Right. That's what the other dating and longevity is. And then it works in there. But, I mean, TV does nobody any good. Like the reality is I have a huge bone to pick with, and I guess it goes both ways. So lots of TV make most men look fucking stupid. right? We're blithering idiots that only want to eat and screw, and we can't do anything right. We're insensitive. We're dumb. That's just how it is, right? According to sitcom television. But they also portray. So if I'm thinking about like Everybody Loves Raymond or King of Queens, those types of shows, they always, the male always makes the wife look like they're never getting enough, like that the wife never wants to have sex with them.
Yeah.
And the wife is always like, well, it's because, I'm busy, I've got 3 kids, or you're annoying, or you piss me off all the time, or whatever the case may be, right? So it's something he did. And of course, they always portray them the other way. So I guess I'll give sitcoms a little bit of a break on that one, because they do portray, or they attempt to portray, but it still comes back on the guy. Like, we're insensitive because we don't pay attention to how busy the lady is.
Well, I think sometimes a lot of people don't pay attention to each other, how busy each other are.
No, right?
Regardless if it's the male or the female. Like, a lot of times that's taken for granted. Let's just face it, taken for granted is a big thing.
Yeah.
We've both experienced being taken for granted.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I don't like about a lot of the shows is how sex gets weaponized, and it's primarily by women, unfortunately, because I know growing up, that's what you learned from watching certain shows or whatever, that you withhold sex and you get what you want or whatever. And I don't agree with playing games with anybody ever, regardless. At the same time, it always made me wonder when I was younger, isn't that why people cheated? Like, I always would try to wrap my head around cheaters. Like, so if you've got someone that you love who doesn't want to have sex with you because they're withholding, because they're mad at you that you didn't take out the garbage, or you lost your paycheck in a poker game, or whatever the case may be, but they're withholding. I feel the fact that you're weaponizing, like, I don't agree with it, but it also makes me wonder if this person that is being withheld, does that give them, like, isn't that why they kind of start to stray or kind of go in a different direction? Or, and again, this is not a blame thing. This is just the way that I thought about it back then was, to me, I don't agree with weaponizing it.
Right.
I don't agree with weaponizing lots of things, but that in particular, I mean, I even think of, there was just a Big Bang episode not that long ago where Penny was like, oh yeah, usually you withhold sex, but Sheldon isn't that person, so you got to do something else. And it was like, she like rattled it off like that's a known thing as a woman, that's what you do. And I don't agree with it.
And the reality is and we use shows a lot of times because they're,
that's where that
somewhat
comes from.
It's somewhat of a reflection of the way a lot of people think, and we've heard people say it and talk about it and complain about it. But you're right. I don't think the weaponizing portion, and I would agree with you that it happens more from a female standpoint.
It always has.
Where it's withhold until they get what they want, or the guy does whatever they want.
It's a game. You're playing a game.
Well, it is. And what was it? We saw that meme the other day that says, what was it? It was something about, damn it, what was that meme?
Which one?
About the woman coming to bed naked, right?
Oh, that a woman that about an argument. It was something about an argument.
I can't remember it. Basically, it made it sound like if the lady comes to bed naked,
you get to decide if you're still mad.
Right.
Yeah. How do you know if you're still in an argument or whatever?
Right.
It was something like that. Yeah.
Something along those lines.
That's all she has to do is come to bed naked, and you decide whether or not you're still arguing. Right. Yeah.
And then you get a sandwich, and man satisfied, man happy. I go sleep now.
I know you love that.
Fucking Christ. It's so ridiculous. And listen, like I can be very dude-like when it comes to that stuff when I want to be.
Of course.
I'll make lots of off-color, silly jokes about that stuff. A minute ago when you said something like, weaponizing sex. I had so many penis jokes go off in my head. It wasn't even funny, but I'm also like, I look at it and go, Jesus, it's so ridiculous the way this shit gets portrayed.
But
and
yes,
the way it's presented, not even just portrayed on TV. Like, okay, you're writers. Somebody wrote that shit from somewhere.
Right.
It's coming from someplace. But for people to think it and then
act on it
or talk shit about it. And they're not usually talking shit about it with their partner. They're out with their friends talking about it, whether it's guys or whether it's girls. They're usually talking shit. And it's never going to get fixed.
And then it's like, why is there so much of a gap with everyone?
Right.
I don't know.
Right. Because you can't talk about it. And
okay,
we've talked a bunch about, you and I personally have talked a bunch about, there's certain things you just can't talk about, right? Or that's what people have always said, right? Yeah. Sex is a giant one.
I know, and if you can't talk about that with your partner,
right? I think, what was it? it's sex, politics,
religion and
race, right?
All the things that everyone's against with each
Correct.
other.
It's
all the things that if everyone communicated,
we'd probably have a better understanding of each other.
But
you can't discuss it for fear of offending somebody, because you're not supposed to, whatever reasons they are. It's the stupidest shit.
That's why it's nice when you find people who are willing to have the conversations, and you can, and they're respectful.
Yeah.
And you learn. That's how you learn. You can't learn otherwise. Otherwise, you're learning from Google or people who someone else's experience, which has got their, spin on it because of whatever. And like for me, I'm like, yeah, thanks for sharing that, but I'm still gonna make up my own mind about stuff.
Well, in what I started to say before, because so a few years back we went. It was the tie-in for what we were saying before. I said it's a perfect lead-in, but I would wait on it. We went to a thing a few years back now. Several years back. Actually, now. It was probably like
pre-COVID. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was a panel, a relationship panel that was, and I think this is part of what motivated us to talk about a lot of this shit. Like this way. We've always talked about this. So absolutely. Anybody questions it, this is us. This is us. Maybe we're a little more formal or concentrated on how we're having a discussion for your entertainment
we normally don't have
purposes.
A microphone in our face.
Correct.
But
see, another penis joke. But this is what we do. We have these conversations. Mm-hmm. It comes up and we talk about it, or we listen to something. We have these conversations. And I don't think maybe people are having them. Maybe they're not. I think it depends on the people, or maybe somebody was excited about it and they want to relay it and somebody's not listening. I don't know. But if that's happening, you got to figure that shit out. We're not going to solve that on this episode. Maybe the next one. But so we went to this relationship panel, and on the panel they had, do you remember who all was on this panel?
It was a couple different couples. One was only a year in, and I think another one was like 20 plus years in. Yeah. And then there was like an actual like marriage counselor or marriage therapist or marriage
therapists. There was one couple.
Sure. I feel like the lady that was running it was kind of like a legitimate licensed therapist or something like that.
So they would take questions from the audience and that kind of thing.
But they had different people that were in different places, like newly married and then married for a really long time. And then I think
they had an individual or two as well sitting up there talking. I think
so as well. Like people that have been married and got divorced.
Yeah, divorced person. They had a divorced person. And I think they had like somebody who's dating or trying to figure out. I think so. I can't remember the big takeaway on this. Not the big takeaway, but the big thing that
got you from the beginning,
stuck in my craw, was there was a couple that were on there, very nice people, right? So I'm not talking shit about these people yet. They were somewhat religious, right?
I think so.
And I think they were one of them was a pastor or pastored like that. If I'm not mistaken.
That might be right. I think you are right.
But they talked about something called sacrificial sex. And we almost named this podcast Sacrificial Sex, but there's so many little topics with that,
Yeah.
Anyway, what is sacrificial sex? What is it, Tina?
What did she say that day?
Well, basically what she said is you give it up no matter what.
If he wants it, because he's your husband.
If he wants it.
And I was like...
And this was the funny thing is it was one-sided for sure. Again, one-sided because it's all about the man, of course. Because men need sex. This is the most ridiculous thing I've heard. And I was actually pissed off later when we got in the car. I was like, this is the fucking dumbest shit. I cannot believe somebody actually thinks this way.
Yeah.
They basically said, if your man is in the mood, then it's your job as the wife to give it to him. Doesn't matter if you got a headache. It doesn't matter if you've had a long day. Doesn't matter. You don't even have to be. You don't even have to.
Sleeping.
Doesn't matter if you were sleeping. Doesn't matter if you. Yeah. It was all about him. No matter what, all of it was all about him for the sacrificial sex. There might be times that she's in the mood and she's happy to have sex, right? And then they do whatever they do. They didn't, obviously they weren't going into detail, but it was agreed upon, maybe they both had orgasms. I don't know what their deal was, but the whole sacrificial sex was literally for his pleasure and that's it. And it didn't matter. And I just...
You've always had issue with that though.
I have issue with it because I think what's the fucking point? Like as a guy.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm unique in this thought. At least from a guy standpoint. Why would I want to have sex with somebody who's not really into it? Why? There's an episode of 2.5 Men. There's an episode of 2.5 Men.
I'm trying to process.
I'm going to bring up TV again, because it's a funny example. There's an episode of 2.5 Men where Charlie was dating this girl. Alan comes across her. Charlie's no longer dating, and Alan starts dating her. And Charlie gives his blessing. And Alan's like, "Really? Are you kidding me? Okay, thanks." And then it comes time for Alan to have sex with her, and she's like, "Okay, do what you will." And she turns her head to the side and lays there real stiff. And he's like, And Charlie knew that's what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Because same thing happened to him, except Charlie did it, right? He totally did it. And Alan didn't know what to do. He left. He got up and walked away.
Yeah, that's kind of fucked up.
Where's the interest? Where's the enjoyment?
Well, but I don't think it's meant to be enjoyed.
It's meant to be enjoyed by one of them.
So, but I think sometimes, and this is, I know it's going to sound really weird coming from me of all people. When I was younger, I would have said, like when people would say it was just physical, it's just sex, it doesn't mean anything, whatever, I would be like, that's bullshit, whatever. And then I learned that, sometimes that is really what it is. Like, you found someone else that you're attracted to that's like, hey, you want to hook up? And you're like, yeah. And it's, okay. It could be a one night stand. It could be a fuck buddy, whatever. But it's like, there's no, it's literally just the act itself, just to release and be done. Okay. So, but I get it. What you're going to say is that's two people involved, not one person involved. Right? Is that what you're going to say?
Well, it's two people agreeing upon having it because they both want to have it.
Right.
One person isn't just giving it up because the other person needs it.
Right. Which is true.
Quote unquote needs it.
Which is true. But I was going to say, but I feel like there are some people that can turn off the emotional part of it, and it literally is just a physical thing. Yeah. And so I don't agree with it either. I thought it was really bizarre and weird, and I was like, what century are we in when they said that? Like, I felt like it was pushing women way back to a long time ago to say that basically when she said those were your wifely duties, I was like,
yeah, wifely duties was one of the things.
I was like,
I did not remember that. until you just said it.
We weren't married yet, which was funny.
We
weren't married yet, but I remember thinking, did she just say wifely duties? And
Right.
I remember thinking, what does that even mean? But obviously, if you Google, at one point in time, there was wifely duties. Like that's old school thinking or whatever, right? So,
but back then, though, let's face it, the mentality of, Little House on the Prairie days, was procreation, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we know there were whorehouses and stuff like that, which were serving.
Well, right. That's what I'm saying. It's always been around.
They weren't serving to women. Right. They were serving to men. With the mentality that a man needs to have that release. This is just what they do,
right,
et cetera, et cetera.
Which is where I think the sacrificial part comes in. But instead of your man going to a whorehouse, you're supposed to let him have it. I think that's where she was going with that.
We're in 2017, 2018, not 1890 fucking 3.
I know, but I think that was the mentality of it was, I think it's more so like if you don't give it to them, they'll go get it somewhere else, which again brings me back to the whole fucking weaponizing thing. So if everyone's going to be using that as like a tool against each other, why are you in a relationship?
Well,
but it's like the same thing as like keeping score. How many bad things did you do versus how many bad things? Oh, you didn't take out the garbage one day. Oh, I didn't, vacuum or whatever. Whatever. We pissed each other off. Like we keeping points and keeping track. It's like, how is that healthy to be keeping track of that kind of stuff? Like, I mean, so I don't know. I think that kind of goes along with it. It's like sometimes I think that's maybe why there's not as many people married anymore as well. Like why so many younger people are just choosing not to actually get married because,
why?
Well, because I think sometimes when you see marriage, I think there's still that 1895, whatever you said, that mentality of here's a wife's duties, here's a husband's duties, and you're supposed to be doing this kind of stuff, whatever, versus you got married because you are in love with each other and you want to share a life together and you go do your relationship the way you want to.
Yeah.
I think some people don't understand that, or maybe their families don't understand that, or maybe their religion doesn't understand that, or maybe their culture doesn't understand that. So they can't, or they're trapped in what they're doing because they're afraid to go against their parents, their religion, their culture, their race, their whatever, because they're scared that if they do, they're going to be on their own. So a lot of people are afraid to do things. So unfortunately, I feel like that's kind of where she was coming from on the whole sacrificial sex thing was, again, I think I laugh because I remember how appalled you were. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like that's why some people stray away from it though.
Yeah, I think so. I feel like in certain cultures, okay, we're talking again, when you're talking about cultural differences, all right, you have to, how do I want to say it? I mean, I'll just say it. I don't agree with it with certain cultures. Right, now, if you're part of that culture and you're okay with that being what it is, then
exactly
fine, right? Because you've accepted the fact that that's your way of life. And I will go back to say that couple, if that's what they choose in their life, then that's fine. Okay. I don't have a problem with them choosing to do that.
No, you didn't like that they were telling other people to do it.
That's correct.
I know.
This is what you should do.
You should be doing
and
this. I remember.
If we want to talk about, 1893, and if they're not going to do it, they're going to go somewhere else to do it. Well, that's what they had whorehouses for. And if you're just doing it to procreate, then who fucking cares? Let them go bang somebody at Miss Kitty's fucking saloon and do whatever he's got to do. And he'll come home and plow the field and then maybe plow your field later on so you guys can have a child if that's the case. So I just don't.
But that was the whole purpose
with the
of
mentality.
I know, but that was the whole purpose behind it. And it just, as time goes on,
we've evolved.
Changes.
That's the point.
Of course, but it's not always looked that way. And there's still some people who still think a certain way and whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's what makes the world go round. Difference There's chocolate and vanilla and strawberry for a reason, because not everybody,
peanut butter on my chocolate.
Not everybody's the same, which is wonderful. Correct. However, that's the funny part though too, because just like there's a lot of people who listen to us that are like, what?
Right.
Because we're like, okay, like we'll swear and we talk about things that people are afraid to talk about, right, or goes against whatever it is that they're doing, and that's okay. It's just this isn't for them. Yeah. But we're also not out there going, now you need to do this.
Correct. I mean, we're
hoping to help. Well, we're hoping
do that
for the people who are listening and
interested in wanting
that
to
is correct.
Achieve a certain
correct.
goal.
That is
right.
Correct.
And that's the difference. I want to go back to the young people. If young people aren't getting together because they're worried of old people ways of doing things, then they're fucking clueless. They're fucking clueless.
It depends on their family.
Okay. Just turn on Everybody Loves Raymond.
I know.
Like, I mean, come on.
No, I know.
I mean, we learned everything we needed to know from watching 80s TV shows. That's all there is to it. I know or 80s movies. They're terrible. But I don't, to think that it's a certain way and to avoid it is other than a very specific cultural norm for them, right?
Yeah.
Like arranged marriage is a great example. Yeah. So, we'll go back to television once again and talk about Big Bang. There's a character on there named Raj. He's Indian. He always avoided getting set up as an arranged marriage because he wanted to meet somebody and fall in love. He's that person.
Right.
For the right person, not that's pre-chosen for him.
Right.
And I can appreciate that. Mm-hmm. But there's a point where he's not meeting people, so he asks his parents to set him up. That goes terribly. But at least at one point in time in the show, it goes terribly. But if you're avoiding it for that reason, okay, you don't want to follow your culture, so you're not participating in it in a certain way. So you're rebelling against the system by not doing what they would normally do. Go find somebody and get married. So if you avoid getting married, then it doesn't matter, right?
Well, yeah.
That's kind of what they're doing.
No, I mean, I think about my own situation.
Yes.
By the time I was 21, 22, how many of my cousins and some of my friends were already married?
Sure.
And that was like the furthest thing from my mind was getting married.
Right.
Even though by the time I was that age, I was in a relationship for 3-4 years or whatever, but I was not in a hurry to get married, didn't care. And by the time I was in my late 20s, started to get after the 26, 27, 28 age. By that time, pretty much everyone I knew was married.
Right.
I had stood up in weddings already and people were already having kids. And I remember my grandma used to say that she felt sorry for me because I didn't have a husband to go home to and I didn't have any kids. And I was just like, if I wanted a husband and kids, I would have a husband and kids. Like, that's the truth.
Absolutely.
If I wanted to get married to my ex-boyfriend and have kids with him, I could have. He even said it to my face. If you would have pushed it, like none of the life that the way that all went would have never happened because I would have pushed for him to get married and whatever. But I didn't want it. Didn't want it. Didn't like it. Didn't need it. Didn't care that everyone else was getting married and having babies. I mean, I didn't get married the first time till I was 35.
Right.
And being Italian, it's like you're a fucking old maid. Actually a 25-year-old maid. So it never bothered me. I know they were talking about me and they would look down their noses at me and the whispers and whatever. I get to live my life the way I want to.
Right.
And anyone, they could say the fact that people have time to actually have a discussion about me and what I'm doing. Wow. Thank you for taking time out of your busy lives to care about what I'm doing in mine. Right. But it was like hilarious because I just always did it the way I wanted to. So that's the funny part was I encourage people if that's what they want though, right?
Yeah,
it's correct. So I did it my way because that was Tina's way.
Yeah.
It wasn't because I saw it on TV, or I read it in a book, or I heard it in a song, or because my best friend told me to, or whatever. It was literally in my heart and soul. I did not want to be married that young. I did not want to have kids that young. I didn't even know if I wanted to get married or have kids at all. And I continued to do it my way, the way I wanted to.
Sure.
I've had a very happy life. I wouldn't change one fucking thing about my life, good and bad, that's happened to me to bring me right to where I am today.
Yeah.
So to me, I will love and support anyone who has those same thoughts, that are trying to come away from, you know, and again, I respect tradition. I have a lot of traditional things, you know, that I love,
Absolutely.
right? You know that I do. I just don't agree that not all traditions are healthy. Not all traditions are healthy.
Right.
So, you know, and to force people into, because this is the way it's always been done, or this is the way this is, that's why there's a lot of misery. And then you're having babies, and then you're bringing the kids into that, and then the kids see that you're not happy, and like it's like, I don't know. I don't agree. If it's what you want, that's one thing, but when it's forced, like the sacrificial or any of this other stuff, the weaponizing, like you're forcing things when you're everyone's always trying to force instead of just, you know, just let things go the way they need to be, the way that the way they were meant to be. Stop trying to push things, right? And I think that's a big part of the problem. And then they're upset that they can't,
right?
Because it feels like everybody feels like they're out of control.
Because there's an expectation,
right?
You have a certain thing in mind that should happen this way, and you're forcing it,
right?
And then when it doesn't go that way, it probably doesn't go that way because you forced it first off.
Right. Well, and it's not something you wanted,
right?
Someone else wanted that for you,
right?
Or they wanted it. Not even for you. They wanted you to do it because you were going to make them look bad or whatever. I mean, how many times have we heard that?
Right.
Yeah. That whole Bella Figura thing.
Right.
You're not going to make me look bad. You're going to do this, you know, kind of stuff. It's not easy. You could be lonely if you get isolated from people. I mean, it could be a scary thing. However, sometimes that's the price you have to pay to live your life the way that you want. You're not going to be that way forever. You're always going to find the like-minded, good-hearted people like you who, you know, love and respect you for who you are. It's just, I mean, it's just, there's times that sometimes it, you know, feels a little isolated.
Yeah.
But going back to the other sex thing, or going back to the whole sex part of it, we were also kind of surprised that we've had conversations. Some people were, you know, we'll all be sitting around talking. A lot of us are divorced and remarried, and, you know, just have conversations about stuff. And we were talking to one of our friends who was married for 27 years, 28 years,
something
I
like
think
that,
it was like that. And he told us he didn't have sex for 10 years. I was like, what the fuck?
Right.
10 years.
I don't know. Well, he didn't have sex at all.
And he didn't step out on his marriage either.
Right. That's why I'm saying at all.
10 years.
Which, I mean, kudos to him, because after 10 years, you just have to have the attitude that the person doesn't want you anymore.
Okay, but
after a couple of years,
you
know, and that's all depends on circumstance. Again, I'm going to use the term circumstances because I get it. If somebody falls ill or something happens, I mean, it's how it is. Yeah. And it's not because that other person doesn't actually, you know, or actually still wants you. They just aren't physically capable of trauma, mustering that kind of energy to make that happen. Right. So there are very valid reasons for that not to happen. But in this case, after 10 years, and it wasn't the scenario, though.
No,
she was not.
She was
sick.
someone who weaponized it.
Absolutely.
And then the fucked up part is that she was upset when he finally decided
nuclear weaponized it.
When he decided enough was enough and he was done with all of it, it was like a big shock.
Right.
You've had like I don't even know if they were even sleeping in the same, like that's the other thing, sleeping in completely separate parts of the house, or not even sleeping in the same bed, or you know, do you have bunk beds? I mean, what the fuck? I mean, you know, and again, like you said, there might be circumstances. However, you have to really, like, honestly, like, it makes me feel bad for people, because I feel like sometimes people think something's gotten so far away. We were here, and then we went here, and then we went here. And then when they think they're here, they think it's easier to just say fuck it, and they just go their separate ways. It's like,
it is.
if you really had this deep, loving connection with this person, and this really was your person, no matter how far off the track you get, you just have to, somebody has to be that first person that says, hey, how come, again, like you said, unless it's like, trauma related, like, somebody has some trauma in their past, like, and again, that's something you would already know. Let's put all the exceptions aside, exceptions like that aside, and we're just talking traditional relationship. You talk about it. Why aren't we having sex? Or, how could we, let's try to, rekindle it or whatever. And then instead of just like, it's interesting. Some people think it's easier just to stop and walk away. And I think
because it's not all,
there must be other things.
It's more complicated than that. Correct. It's not just that, it's other things. So it becomes, it's habits that get created. I think, if everything's fine, right, with them, they're not disliking each other because they're being taken advantage of, or they're being neglected, or not heard or listened to, or whatever the case may be, right? If all things are fine, what happens is people don't recognize they don't recognize all of the symptoms that have caused the problem.
True.
Okay. They just recognize the problem. And then when they look and maybe see a lot of the symptoms, they feel like it's too hard to go back and correct them or talk about it. That's why it's easier to just be done, because they don't think that it can be fixed. Now, maybe they've had an indication that it couldn't have been fixed. If that's the case, okay, that's different. But I feel like you still, if you put the effort in, at least you can say you put the effort to try. If you just give up, and I think there's circumstances where it makes sense that people would do that, but I think you have to pay attention to the symptoms, and I think you have to pay attention to those symptoms ahead of time. And I'll give you a great example. You use the sleeping apart thing. I know there's probably people that we know that don't necessarily sleep in the same room because shift work, right? Mm-hmm. So them getting up, one person works overnight, and if you have to sleep during the day, it's very difficult to do if you've never had to do it. Mm-hmm. If you go out and watch these sleep study or these sleep experts, they will tell you that the majority of people were not designed to work overnight.
Of course.
Right? So that's why it's difficult. There's a few very small percentage of people are built to have their circadian rhythm be that way. The rest of us are lying to ourselves, basically. Yeah. It's like the argument about multitasking, right? We say, oh, no, I do great working night shift. No, you really don't. You just have adapted and made it work. Yeah. But that doesn't mean you wouldn't do better working normal hours, being up during the day and sleeping at night.
Yeah.
But they'll make that decision because that sleep is difficult to get. So they may get home and then their partner is getting ready for work and stuff, and it's too much noise or too much hustle and bustle or hassle or whatever the case may be. And it wakes them up. So what they do is they have a bed set up in a separate room, and that's where they go sleep. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
If you take the time when you're not on shift, on your off days, to sleep in the same bed and make some magic happen, right?
Right.
Even if it's just being together.
Yeah.
That's important. But I think people get into a routine, and then it just becomes that becomes the normal thing, and everybody's more comfortable sleeping apart. And now there's one thing, that's just one small example of stuff that happens. TV, there's some TV shows that I probably like to watch that you're not interested in. So I'll watch them when I can. You do the same thing. Mm-hmm. believe it or not, we don't watch all of the shitty shows together.
Mm-mm.
There's some that I just am like, I'm not fucking watching that. But Tina will watch it, and that's okay. But she'll watch it while I'm at work, or if I'm off driving, going to do something, you'll fill in the time by watching that.
And you do the same. If I'm at the office and you're off that day.
Or you're working and I happen to be off one day, I might go in the bedroom because you're still working here in the house. And it's like, well, what am I going to do? Sit on the couch, But the point being is we take the time to make time for the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We make sure we watch our shows together because that's important time for us. And it's TV for us. That's what we grew up liking.
Yeah.
We've always liked TV. That's how we are.
Yeah.
So that's probably why a big part of we talk about television on here.
But we've also like read books together.
Yes, but that's what I'm trying to say is it's find the time to do those things with one another, and to have sex, is probably a good idea because there is a lot of intimacy that's in that. And despite what you will hear on television or what you'll hear people say, it is intimate for men too. It is intimate for men too. Yes, maybe it's a little more,
emotional,
cavemanish, but it is still intimate for us.
Well,
there is connection in that.
Who doesn't like to know that after, 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, that your partner still wants to have sex with you and still likes to look at you naked and, likes to touch you and all that. I know, but that's
they're
what
like,
I'm saying.
Oh,
is like,
God, this one always with the sex. And it's probably been 3 months. And they're like, it's always with the sex.
Yeah,
I'm not sure who that was,
understand
but it was a good. I'm sure.
Although I will say that our friend that was 10 years did get topped by another friend who was at 15 years in her marriage.
Yeah.
But hers had a little bit of some like mental and emotional abuse kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
If I had to guess, she was probably one of those that was forced into sacrificial. If I had to guess, she's older.
Yeah.
But that was like, again, mind-blowing to me though to think about. But it also showed she also had like a very strong hatred towards men when we first met her too. Like,
oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it was like super like, I mean, for lots of reasons, but I feel like that's also a little bit of a part of it as well, as kind of messes with your head when you feel like you're not desirable.
Yeah.
So I think that's another part of it. And then you go out looking for the wrong kind of attention and, that, I mean, there's just, when you think about how many emotional factors and things that go on that have so much to do, like how everything is connected, but people don't realize they're connected. And when you compartmentalize, you're treating everything differently and it's not. And I think that's part of it, is people not understanding that it's all one thing here, working together, mind, body, soul, like, for real.
Sure.
Like,
but
I mean, I learned more about the nervous system last year.
Right.
I didn't realize how much the nervous system, like all this shit that was happening to me when I couldn't walk and I was and I would fall and I couldn't feel my hands and like my legs would wobble, and then like thinking about like not wanting to get on the escalator and not realizing that it was my brain was like scared because my body wasn't shooting the right way.
Right.
To think about all, it was like, holy fuck.
Right.
Like all this is connected.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, most people are probably like, oh, duh. But to think, if you ever saw what the nervous system looks like when you actually see to think that all that shit's all together is just,
the people that say duh have never experienced not struggling with, they've never experienced struggling with walking or doing something as simple as getting on an escalator with a small suitcase, right?
But I never even thought of that until that happened.
It's
like,
you stop as somebody who didn't have a health issue. You stop and go, okay, just step on it and pull the thing on with you. Just keep moving. It'll do it all for you. You don't even have to pull the other thing. Just hold your arm back and let it roll. But you struggled with it.
I did badly, remember? And I didn't know why. And then we figured out why. But.
And I think that's a good example because your relationship is the same way. Everything is tied to everything. you're not having sex, or you're not talking, or you're not doing this, or you're
pretend everything's
feeling
okay
resentful towards the other
eggshells.
person, and you don't understand why.
Yeah.
Well, it's all this little shit that you've let get out of hand that either you're afraid to talk to, or you can't. And if you can't talk to the other person about it, why? Is it because you can't talk about it because you were taught it's not something you should talk about? Or is it because the other person isn't willing to talk about it?
Yeah.
Right.
And
for what reasons? Right. All that stuff has to get figured out, but it has to get talked about.
Agreed.
And if that's go to a therapist together, and because that's the environment you can talk about it in, like legit, it's okay to talk about that stuff there.
Right.
Stupid safe space bullshit. The safe space is your relationship. And if your relationship isn't the safe space, because what you talk about does get, we'll use the term again, weaponized against you later on, then that's a big, big issue that you have to look at. However, it gets easier. We talked about this in one of the early podcasts when it comes to taboo kind of stuff, weird shit, whatever it is.
Sometimes it's awkward.
Hang-ups in your relationships or previous relationships that you're worried about talking about. You have to just
do it.
Yeah, right. You just have to do it. And it may be uncomfortable. You may blush. You may be like, fuck, I don't really know how else to say it. Well, you just have to say it, and you just have to talk about it. And
that's the shit that brings you closer to the other
person
does too.
And it gets easier.
Yeah.
It really gets easier to talk about this stuff.
It does.
We could, to give you some silly examples of us, there's things that have happened and we call them levels. We joke about new levels in our relationships. And and everybody has them. They all have them, but they're funny to us. That like the first time you decide you're going to fart in front of the other person, or the first time
you pee with the
door open for some reason. Some people are still like, no, I'm not doing that. It's never happening. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But you have something. You have a level. You have something that you would have been afraid to do when you were dating. Like get up, no makeup, right?
Yeah.
There's some people that'll get up ahead of time and make sure they look great and then lay back down so they look great and fresh in the morning, right? So everybody has them.
Yeah.
When you hit them, well, the next one's going to be even worse, right? It's just going to be even worse.
And we laugh. We're like new level,
right? We don't have as many these days.
No.
Because we're like, I don't know, we're like a level 80 warrior in some Warcraft shit. I don't even know the game, but I know there's levels. So it's harder to get to new levels because you've already, you're at the top level. We haven't met the final boss yet, but it's those are examples of talking about things. You're experiencing things that are uncomfortable.
I mean, if we go back to like when we first met, I had issues talking about sex and things like that.
Yeah.
Because it was difficult for me, and I used to I knew that I couldn't say nothing because I knew that would create an eggshell, whatever. Yeah. But I also remember when I would talk to you, I would do this.
Yeah, she would pull her shirt up over her face, or if we were laying in bed talking about something, she would pull her blanket up.
This is how our conversations would go.
Right. So she would hide her face because it was much easier to talk about it that way.
And then when I realized it wasn't as scary as, it was fucking scary to talk about it, but it was like, I have to put it out there because otherwise it keeps me as the prisoner.
Right.
Those things keep me as the prisoner. So I would talk, and then, you showed, like it wasn't a big deal. Like basically like, thank you for sharing that, whatever. And then all of a sudden I was like this, and then I was like this, and then I was like this. And it literally, that was kind of leveling a little bit, but it started off where there was things that I would say that I would be like, oh.
for those that aren't watching, Tina was giving the example that she would show a little more of her face each time.
It was like my eyes, and you could see my face more, and then
so
eventually
the barrier was coming down.
But it was the things that are uncomfortable and awkward, and things that I wasn't allowed to talk about or able to talk about or uncomfortable talking about. That, and it was in that, since we were talking about sex this time, that's where it started. Most of it was with that. But it was always nice to know that you know, and I had to be okay with it if you were an asshole about it. Thankfully you weren't, but if you were, I had to be okay with it as well. It would also show me that you weren't the right person.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you would have been like, or,
you know, or
what the fuck, or you know, that's right. Or, you know, the way you're feeling right now is right. Or, you know, whatever. I would have known that you weren't the right person for me. But I still would have felt good knowing that you brought it out because, you know, after my deep dive, nothing gets held back. Nothing's staying inside anymore. It's all coming out one way, shape, or form is coming out typically this way. But anyway, so I feel like those are the pieces people are missing with the intimacy part of it. And then, I mean, you know, and turning like, and it's not like, I know there's like all kinds of weird ass sex shit like that people do or whatever, but it's still just fun. No, you know, like people do all kinds of crazy shit and there's nothing wrong with that. But I feel like just the fun, I don't know, just the playfulness of all of it. I feel like that's what's missing for a lot of people is, you know, just to like laughing, just flirting, whatever. I feel like that's missing from a lot of people's relationships, is that part of it, of like the flirting with each other and working their way up to getting hot for each other again in that way. You know what I mean? To get more without playing games per se. Yeah.
I think, I mean, whatever your thing is, you know, if you're building up to that, you know, you build up to it, whatever that is.
But still the playfulness is what brings out that.
Not everybody's playful though. I don't think. Not everybody's playful. Some of them.
I guess I'm saying if you kind of keep it not quite as
serious,
not quite as robotic. Like that's where you're when you detach, like I was saying earlier, like me of all people, I didn't think it was possible to have sex without being in love with the person, but in reality you can. You know, like I think everyone has the capability. I think you just have to, you know, flip your mind on it. But I think that's where sometimes when it becomes so robotic, that's when people lose the spark with each other, because it's like you said, like going to your bed instead of going in bed together or whatever, like those kind of things. Because it does become a habit. I think sometimes because it's like, oh, let's do this, or, you know, whatever kind of thing, or, you know, always in missionary or whatever the case. It's like, you're just doing it to do it and be done. You're not having the spark the connection isn't there. It's literally just the physical act.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're always having sacrificial sex, it's not going to mean anything. Right. And I know that's not exactly what you're saying, but the point is if you're always only doing something that,
just to do it.
Yeah. I mean, we're not talking about specific sex. That's for you and your partner to figure out, of course. You know, if you're not happy with, you know, taking it over the bed rail, then you probably want to have a conversation about that, right? Like my thighs are getting bruised from this thing. It's not cool anymore, right? I can't walk the next day. Whatever.
My knees don't bend like that anymore.
That's right.
I get a cramp in my leg.
Right.
I'm too old for this shit. No,
exactly.
But what I meant was just that in that case, I think that's the opportunity to connect again.
And those are the opportunities to talk about it, because you may not think you can, and you absolutely can, but it's going to be uncomfortable.
Oh God, it's so awkward.
If you built it up in your mind that it's already difficult, or you were taught that that's not something you talk about, then you don't.
Then you go call Dr. Phyllis.
Yeah. I don't know who Dr. Phyllis is, but
Phyllis Levy, Sunday nights. She was on, I don't know what radio station. And she used to talk about people used to call in and talk about sex, and we used to always sneak it and listen to it.
Never heard
because you weren't because it was
I don't
like
think I heard it.
It was like Sunday
was that the
nights.
curly-haired lady.
I
or
don't know what
something?
she looked like. I just remember her voice, and her
feel
name
like
was
there was one on
Dr.
TV.
Phyllis Levy. She was on the radio.
Yeah.
And at Sunday nights when you're in bed, me and my sister, we'd always laugh because we'd giggle.
Yeah.
Because people would call in with like their sex problems.
Shit. Yeah. It's ridiculous. Well,
I'm sorry, I was totally
shout
joking.
out to Dr. Levy. But anyway, I think, yeah, I think, if you have to stop and realize if you're doing some of these things, why you're doing them, and everything we talk about ultimately boils down to communicating with your partner
and bringing people
together. And that's
together.
what this is certainly about. Yeah. And bringing people together and fixing what is holding you back or holding your relationship back.
Yeah.
And it does ultimately come down to communication, whether it's tough conversations, whether it's embarrassing conversations.
Awkward.
It doesn't matter what
Remember,
they are.
it's only as awkward as you let it be.
Yeah. You think. Until you're at that edge waiting to jump up to that new level, and you're like, oh, do we really want to do this now? Anyway, yeah, I think it's good. I think it's good stuff. And I'd like to hear if anybody has any thoughts on sacrificial sex. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's like literally been bothering you. Like, it was so funny how you were still mad about it all these years later when we talked about it.
I don't like the concept of it. I think it's very self-serving and very
narcissistic.
And to say it's sacrificial is like, what are you, Joan of Arc here? You're giving it up for, come on, man. No, it doesn't work that way. But anyway, if anybody wants to reach out to us, tell us your thoughts. You can reach out to us at realshowertalk@gmail.com.
Real.shower.talk on Instagram.
Yes. And then it's Real Shower Talk on
Facebook.
The Facebook. Yeah. And we'll keep you posted how our lasering goes.
Yeah, they don't do measurements again until it's over, so we still got time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, a lot of time.
Yeah.
And we'll post, we'll share pictures.
We'll share before and afters and stuff, for sure.
Just keep an eye on our social media, and then I guess until next time.
Bye.